Welcome to the Zapata brand. And now, your host, George Zapata.
Infamous is the best way to describe the power of the Mafia in American history. It is a destructive and juggernaut force that's still in operation today, still illegally finding ways to make money, still recruiting in secrecy, and still destroying families within. This interview is a story about Rita Gigante, daughter of mob boss VICENT the Chin Gigante. Rita is a person who witnessed firsthand the destructive power of the mob on society, their criminal associates, and her own family. But it's also a story about her abilities as a medium, abilities I believe became enhanced through her own life experiences and hardship. Gigante, notorious name from our area. New York, head of the Mafia, head of the commission. If you could, you're Rita Gigante. You're the daughter of probably the most powerful Mafia boss, and I would say not arguably. I think he is, and that's something we'll get into prior to that. Sure. But if you could, give my audience an idea of who you are, what you're doing now, but who you were growing up.
Okay. So I am the youngest daughter of Vincent and Olympia Gigante. I came into this world. Most people don't know what an empath is. So I'll just describe what it is. So it's a very sensitive energy. It's someone that comes in that can feel everybody's stuff. So even before you're born, you can feel things in your mother's womb. The voices you can hear. If there's anxiety around you, you can feel it. It actually affects the baby before they even come out of the womb. So my mom was extremely anxious when she was pregnant to me. Initially, my dad didn't want to have any more kids. I was a surprise. You know, I was like that change of life baby because my brother is 10 years above me, but my oldest sister is 16 years above me.
Oh, so for contents, how old was your father when he had you?
37, 38.
38. Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
So it was a change of life. It was like, oops. And so initially he had asked my mom if she would consider having an abortion. It's the first time my mother ever told him, am I allowed to curse?
Go ahead, have at it.
All right. First time my mother ever told him to go fuck himself. And the first and last time he ever backhanded her.
Okay.
And so here I am, right? So I come into this very, very dark, I want to say there was a lot of dark energy where my father was concerned because he was living a triple life, not a double life.
Right.
So his priority was his family in the street. So we'll call that, you know, his job, his living, right?
Right.
Then there was us, his family. But there was also another family. And so, ironically, that family lived in the city when we moved out to New Jersey. So they were out in Jersey first, and then my father switched it. He brought us out to Jersey. Okay. He brought them back to the city. Okay. And so I grew up in a very, very anxiety-ridden house. Being an empath, and being able to feel everything, I can feel my mom's stuff. I could feel my dad's stuff, my siblings. So a lot of stuff was going on then. I mean, before I was born, the other woman was pregnant as well. So I only have a 6 months difference between my half brother and me.
Wow.
Okay. So by the time I was born, my mother was wrecked. Right. At that point. And her anxiety, I pretty much came into the world to have her cope, you know, so she was able to get along much better with my energy around. And, you know, children just know things, not know how they know it, but they know it. So I'm knowing I have to take care of my mother. I'm knowing that emotionally without me, she can't get through the day, right? That's a big burden to carry. I also remember my father saying to me at a very young age, take care of your mother. Make sure you take care of your mother. Now, you're in an Italian Catholic household, right? You're groomed as a female to take care of your mother, get married, have children, and when mom passes, you may be able to have a life after that. We're not even sure. So
So you're saying you being the daughter,
the youngest,
you would maybe have a life, meaning
meaning once she passed, if
you
I
take over?
No. If I
oh,
decided to have a life after that, I
Oh,
could. But
okay.
until then, there was no
okay,
life.
okay. I see.
Right? It
I see.
wasn't like you were allowed to, at least on my end,
Mm-hmm.
you know, everything was frowned upon. You going to college or starting a business or, you know, you were female. You were just expected to
Okay.
do the right thing
Right.
in the eyes of them. Now, growing up as Italian Catholic, there was much loyalty in the family, you know, and a lot of people always ask me, did you know who he was before you actually knew? And I'll tell them that I knew he was something more than what they were saying, but I didn't know who he was and exactly what he did or how powerful he was. Okay. But you also know, and this is goes without saying with most in this type of family, you don't ask questions. You know not to ask questions.
Right.
So I would go to my sister and ask questions. You know, they'd tell me my father was sick. I'd say, well, how is he sick? Well, he's got a heart condition, which he has,
Right.
you know. And so I grew up just thinking Dad was sick, right? He only lived with us about a year and a half. I'm sorry, not even a year, because I was 6 months when we came out to Jersey.
Okay.
So he lived with us for a year. And around Christmas time, my sister brought a check to the police department, $50. And it was a donation to the police department, right? At that time, they felt that my father was bribing them. Okay. And so they arrested my mother and father.
Oh, okay.
And at that moment, at that time, my father was like, I'm out of here.
Right.
I'm going back to the city. And so I was a year and a half. He left. It was me, my mom, my brothers and sisters. But my first sister left when I was only 4 years old. She got married, left the house, had her first son. I was an aunt at 6, you know?
Was she still involved with her father?
My sister was the closest to my dad.
Okay.
In I want to say in confidence, like he told her everything. At the age of 15, my sister knew about this other family. And there are just things that no child at that age should know at that point.
Now,
right?
did your mother know?
My mother knew.
Oh.
My mother knew the day. Now, we all know Dad was in jail at one point, right?
Yep.
He went away with Vito Genovese. At that time, he was involved with that woman. Now, my dad already had 4 kids with my mother. He didn't have kids with her yet. Okay. So she actually showed up in the courtroom.
Right.
And my mother doesn't know anything until she gets on the elevator to leave, and the woman gets on the elevator with another person. And in that instance, my mother knew it was her.
Okay.
And so, ironically, my grandmother knew who she was in the courtroom. And so before the elevator scene, my grandmother walks up to her and says, stay away from my son. He's got 4 kids. And then it was like a little bit of a commotion. My grandfather took her away and said, mind your business, the whole thing. So my mom knew.
Now, let me ask you, was your grandmother,
my father's
father's
mother.
how about your father's dad? Was he involved in the mafia at all, or no?
No.
No. Okay.
He was a jeweler,
Okay.
but they struggled. My grandmother was a seamstress. Okay, he was a jeweler. Now, when they lived in Italy, my grandmother and my grandfather, she was studying to be a pharmacist, and her father was a doctor and a pharmacist. We had a pharmacy in Italy, and they worked in there. But it really stems back to him, my great-grandfather, because at the time in Italy, they called the Mafia the Black Hand.
Black Hand, yeah.
And they were ruthless.
A little different than they are here.
It was nothing like it is here. They would go after your family. So my great-grandfather witnessed something. Sorry.
It's okay. No, this fly's driving me nuts.
Yeah. Witnessed something of the Black Hand.
Right.
He was supposed to testify. They approached him and told him that if he testified, they'd kill his whole family and him.
Right.
Being a pharmacist, he knew drugs. He killed himself with strychnine, which is a poison.
Right. Okay.
And that was the beginning of, we'll call it the Mafia, entering the family history.
Okay.
Unbeknownst to my grandmother, she meets my grandfather, who was sickly at the time. He wants to come here to America because his brothers are here. She decides she's going to come. They get married, they come. And my grandmother's a very proud woman. Came from a very wealthy background. And schooling was important to her. So when she came here, she became a seamstress. He was a jeweler. They struggled. No matter how much my great-grandmother sent her, she even sent her plane tickets to come back home. My grandmother said, no, I made my bed. I got to sleep in it now. She ends up having 5 sons, actually 6. One, the first Vincent, who passed away, he was a baby, passed away in Italy. And then she had my father. So my grandmother also had gifts like me. Actually, both my grandmothers. So she was able to see visions, my grandmother. So she had a vision of the Blessed Mother. And she was dying, my grandmother, at a young age. She had some type of blood poisoning. They had to find the cure to it. And so she had a vision of the Blessed Mother who came to her, and she begged the Blessed Mother to let her live. She would endure anything as long as she could watch her kids grow up, because they were being separated between the brothers, my grandfather's brothers at that point, the kids. And so she lived, my grandmother, till she was 95. But she endured many things before that. So she was able to have those visions. She was very devoted to the Blessed Mother. And I grew up in a typical Catholic environment, but I knew at a very young age, it just didn't fit my belief system. I took what I felt comfortable with. Like, yes, I was comfortable speaking with Mary and Jesus, but I'm comfortable speaking with Buddha if, Buddha shows up, or, somebody else. So I took that piece. I took the piece of the angels because I connected to the angels. The rest I left.
Okay.
All the fear, all the drama that came with it was left behind for me. So I struggled as a young child growing up in that house because my energy was constantly being used to help my mother. And at that age, you don't know that that's what's happening, right? I'm an empath. Nobody knows in my family what an empath is, or the fact that I'm sensitive, or that I have these gifts. I didn't even know I had half these gifts, right? My first anxiety attack was at the age of 5. My first panic attack was at the age of 7. My first experience with obsessive compulsive disorder was at the age of 10. I was in and out of school constantly because I couldn't handle being away from my mother, knowing I was supposed to be helping her. And she was very, very depressed. She was taking medication for it. So I wasn't in school a lot when I was young. And I was picked on when I was young because I was a tomboy. I dressed like, I didn't dress in dresses ever, only if they put me in a dress, but otherwise it didn't happen. And I was, pushed around by the boys, and they would make fun. And I could run with the best of them because I was very athletic. Actually, sports saved me. If it wasn't for sports, I don't know what I would have done.
Now, was this a Catholic school or was this a public?
Regular public school.
Public school, okay.
Yeah. I went to Catholic school 1 year in my 8th grade.
Okay.
And they tried to send me to a Catholic high school, and I told them, you're not going to be able to put me in a skirt again, so don't even bother.
Okay.
So my gifts came over time. My first 2 gifts were clairsentient, which was I could feel everything. Then claircognizant, which about the age of 15 started to, I started to realize I had that gift, which is the gift of knowing,
Right.
and not knowing how I knew things, okay? My clairsentient, my clairaudient, my clairvoyant, I can hear and see, came much later. And the fact that I became a medium was totally by mistake, because not until my father passed and he came to me did I know I could even do that. So this was years and years of going through a lot of trauma in my house, not knowing who my father was, visiting him and then being pushed out of the house. Like, okay, time to go. There was only a certain amount of time because he either had business or he had the other family to attend to.
Right.
Okay. Holidays they were stressful to the max because of that. He had to split his time in 9 different directions always.
Right.
And so over time, my body physically started to break down because of everything that was going on in the life. And so I really knew that he was something more, but nobody was telling me. Not knowing the truth and being afraid of him. And that began, the reason why I had that anxiety attack at the age of 5 is because I witnessed him beating somebody. And they didn't know that I knew because I was underneath my grandmother's table.
Right.
And so the only reason why I knew it was him, I saw his pinky ring when I knew that that was his. So I'm listening to the whole commotion of that. This man drops to the floor. His blood is starting to trickle to my feet. The last thing I remember is my father stamping on his face and saying, don't ever fucking disrespect me again. Like in the lowest, like, because he never spoke. He never spoke loud, never spoke on a phone for like 40 years, right? So after that, they drag him out. I don't know if he lived or he died. I still
Now, how
don't
old
know.
were you at this point?
How old?
How old were you at that point?
5.
Okay. 5. One of the things you said before was you didn't know who it was, but everybody else knew.
Yes.
Meaning, if you were going somewhere, I mean, at that point, were you hanging out with kids and whatever? Like just playing at the park or whatever?
Not at that age.
Okay.
No. It was interesting, though. As I got older, I realized some kids couldn't come to my house.
Right.
And others were allowed.
Okay.
And there were only so many people that my mother trusted that were Italian, that understood that, So I had no idea that was.
So you're already starting, you're going 5, 6, 7. You're behind the 8 ball as it is.
Absolutely.
Not only with school, education-wise, but socially.
Socially, absolutely.
You're now behind the 8 ball.
Yep.
Now, not knowing what you know inside, do you think your anxiety and all that other stuff that you had coming through is more coming from your father's side and you're feeling his feelings than your mother's side?
100% both.
Okay.
100% both. My mother had so much. Thank God for my sister Yolanda, who was 16 years older than me.
Is she still alive?
Yes.
Okay, good. Wow, good.
She's a surrogate mother to me, so she's 72 now. And so she was the one who got me through a lot when my mother could not be available emotionally for me. So.
And it had to be hard on your mom.
Oh,
I mean, you're
can't
talking.
even imagine.
And it's funny. I've, talked to, well, not talked to personally, but I've seen a lot of podcasts. Everyone that's involved in that life.
Yeah.
Someone like a Michael Franchese, John Gotti Jr. to an extent, their families are all destroyed. All destroyed. Whether they're kids, their kids, something is always. So this life puts such a strain on a family. Why would you think that your dad chose that life as opposed to, because to be quite honest with you, your dad, over the years that I've read research, he could have been the CEO of any company. There are 5 mafia families that formed a commission in the 30s to create a unified crime syndicate in New York City. The Bonanno, Colombo, Gambino, Genovese, and Lucchese families were formed to keep the peace, rule their family and territory, and ultimately make money. Think of this organization as a major corporation. They had a hierarchy of positions rules and consequences, bosses, underboss, captains, and soldiers. Much of these families are still in operation today. The Genovese family hasn't had an official acting boss since Gigante. He could have been the CEO of any company in the world.
He was brilliant.
Brilliant guy.
Brilliant.
Why would he choose that life?
Because back then it was the easiest, I want to say, avenue to go. Because when Vito met him, he was a kid. He's 14 running numbers, you know. I mean, it's crazy, right? So, but when Vito met him, my dad's very charismatic.
Right.
Very. So he loved him. He just fell in love with him. My dad wanted to be a boxer.
Right.
Nobody at 16 was able to go into a ring unless somebody knew how to pull a string, right? They did it. They got him in the ring.
Right.
They probably made good money from him. You know?
Probably, yes.
But after that, again, they came from poverty. So it's not like they had a lot of money. His dad wasn't doing well. My grandmother killed herself doing, you know, the seamstress stuff.
Right.
So he, you know, this was easy. He got brought in. He saw how easy it was to make money. And it was not necessarily about the money, but it was more about the power behind it. You know, it was easy to get caught up in that power.
Now, did it ever, now I don't know what your relationship was with him going through, but was there ever a time where he just got, because it would, to me, would be, you're sick and tired of, like he had millions of dollars.
Yeah.
Let's be honest.
Yeah.
Okay. It'd be sick and tired of like, okay, I got my 10, 20 mil, I'm going to bail.
Yeah, no,
Was there ever a time you didn't know?
He was that type of person that was, I made a decision. There was one time I remember him telling me, because we speak, right, in the spirit world. He says there was one time where he could have gotten out, and he stayed. And so I remember asking him why, like, why would you choose to stay? And he said, there was a few things. It was like he was lured in. He was already connected to these men that he felt a loyalty to. Vito treated him very well. Don't forget, he fucked up the one shooting, right?
Yeah.
He should have been dead himself, right?
Probably in about 24 hours. A crazy story during the 50s involved Frank Costello, acting boss of the Luciano family. Vito Genovese ordered Vincent Gigante to assassinate Frank Costello. As Costello was exiting an apartment building, Gigante shot him. He survived the shooting, and a witness recognized Gigante as the shooter. Attempted murder would have landed Gigante in jail for a long time, but Costello, either following the code of secrecy or out of the fear, told authorities he could not remember the shooter. Gigante, who somehow didn't get whacked himself for the assassination attempt, thanked Costello. After the shooting, Costello retired from the mob.
Don't forget, he fucked up the one shooting, right?
Yeah.
He should have been dead himself, right?
Probably in about 24 hours.
And it didn't happen. So you got to know that there was a tremendous amount of respect for him. And
well, I think about, you got to be as ballsy as, you know, well, John Gotti didn't pull the trigger, but you got to be ballsy to go after Joe Colombo at that point, how high he was.
Right.
He is the head of a family.
Right.
And you mess up shooting him and he sees you.
Right.
Then you're going to go to court and he knows you. And then, you know, Joe Colombo obviously said, hey, I don't know who it was, saved him kind of to get out of prison there. And your father thanked him, to be honest with you. He said, hey, thanks. This is going out. So now you got to know he's such a high level guy. Vito pulls him in. Does Vito say, this is the guy that's going to replace me? Or no?
It's interesting. Vito dies in jail, right?
Right.
Vito, I don't think ever says anything. I think it's more like it's understood that he's left in charge. According to like him being in jail with my father, like that was going to be the rise of him. But there was always somebody in front of him, like playing that role. And he always stood behind.
There was always a front man, somebody that everybody thought was the head boss, but wasn't. The Genovese family hasn't had an official acting boss since Gigante. The Genovese family hasn't had an official acting boss since Gigante.
And he always stood behind, and he was happy about that.
There was always a front man, somebody that everybody thought was the head boss, but wasn't. The Genovese front man was Fat Tony Salerno, who served as the underboss to Gigante. The Chin was always the boss, hiding in the shadows and playing the part of the odd father.
But there was always somebody in front of him,
Right.
like playing that role. and he always stood behind, and he was happy about that. That's how he wanted it.
Which
right?
brings me to a question I want to ask you.
Sure.
I listened to Rudy Giuliani on a podcast.
Okay.
Funny. Okay.
My father would call him O Diablo. He'd call him the devil.
Okay. Well, this
Couldn't
is an interesting one. Go ahead.
No, he couldn't stand him. Go
Okay.
ahead.
So he was on a podcast, the Patrick Bet-David podcast. He was on the Mafia States of America. I watched it.
Yeah.
And your father's name got brought up. And he laughed and said, Chin Gigante thought he was the number one guy. He was like number 8. Is that true or not?
No.
Everybody says no. He who said he heard the tapes, which the people like Tony Salerno and others that were involved said, no, we keep him out. He's number 8. Rudy Giuliani is a United States attorney well known for using the RICO law, a law originally created to go after the mob. The law Rudy used against violent mobsters is now being used against him, as he is indicted also on RICO charges for political reasons. In later years, because of his work as a lawyer, he would become mayor of New York City. He's false in the assumption that Gigante was 8th on the list, and Michael Frances confirms this.
Told him he was number 2. He was like number 8.
I have to disagree with that.
Really?
Yes.
Why is that? Kai, can you pull up a picture of this guy? Chin Gigante?
Chin was number 1.
Chin was number 1.
Absolutely. He was the real power behind the Genovese family.
Chin Gigante thought he was the number one guy. He was like number 8. Is that true or not?
No.
Everybody says no. He who said he heard the tapes, which the people like Tony Salerno and others that were involved said, no, we keep him out. He's number 8. Yeah. I find that hard to believe. And Michael Frances and even Sammy the Bull Gravano said, no, Chin was the power guy.
Yeah.
So how could he be so off and the mafia so on?
I hear my father in my head going, because he's fucking delusional. He's delusional. But he's, he's laughing. He's giggling to me. He says, I was so far removed in the background that, and that's how he wanted it. He's saying that Rudy, it was more like he couldn't get to him, so it pissed him off.
Right.
Right? So there was this kind of like little vendetta thing going with him back and forth, and my father would just laugh at him going.
Yeah, but think how smart that is.
Yeah.
He was, even Paul Castellano or Gambino.
Yeah.
They were out there. You know who they were, but there was no one. They knew. Okay, he's the head.
Right.
This guy's the head. This guy's the. Your father was behind people. That is a genius move.
Of course. But everybody knew he was the head of the commission.
Correct.
So I don't know where Rudy.
I have
got
no
his
idea. I thought
information.
I thought it was odd when I was doing the research for it. I said, and he blatantly said it.
Yep.
And it took Mike Francesi and Sammy the Bull to say, no, that's not true.
Yeah.
He was the guy.
Yeah.
Once Castellano was out of the picture, here comes, the Chin Gigante. He was the next guy.
Right.
Who nothing could happen. If you want to go to what the commission does, what does the commission do? What is your father's role above just running the Genovese family? He's part of what's called the commission. And what was his role?
His role was you could not make a move like John did.
Oh.
You could not make a move without his permission, because he played by the old rules, and there were morals and ethics to that even lifestyle than most know, right?
Right.
So he played by that. He was fair. He was a very fair man. Nobody got popped or killed just to get popped or killed. You know what I mean? It's like there had to be a reason. He had to himself say, okay,
Time to go.
Okay. It's like, this was not like Vito, on the other hand, was completely different.
Right. And I did read that. He was a little nutty.
Yeah.
If something happened, you look at him as his old man who just always so nice. Hey, don't. But in a second, he would turn on you and you'd be dead the next day. The next day you'd be dead.
Yeah.
So let's move a little forward.
Sure.
As we're talking about your father, now let's get into the 80s where it's the wild, wild west in New York.
Yeah.
Okay. You said he never came home much. He was always in the city.
Yeah, he would sometimes come home during the week at 3:00 in the morning. He'd pull into the garage, which was underneath the house, so nobody, the door would come down, nobody would see. The next day he'd leave about 3:00 in the afternoon. So we'd have like an early dinner with him, and then he would go.
Okay. And he would be doing a lot of business meetings and business meetings, quote unquote. But when he went in there, he would go and he was the highest guy there.
Right.
And he runs into John Gotti. John Gotti, known for his flashy suits and beating court cases through intimidation and paying people off, became the boss of the Gambinos after killing Paul Castellanos. As a member of the Gambinos, Gotti did not like the leadership of his boss, Paul. He also was said to have a secret drug operation on the side, an operation that if found out by Paul, Gotti would have been killed immediately. Gotti's crew, which included Sammy the Bull Garano, killed Paul outside a restaurant, and Gigante was angry. The hit was not sanctioned by the commission. Choices and consequences. The Chin retaliated by blowing up a car that Gotti was supposed to be in, but was not. John Gotti kills Paul Castellano, who Gigante, your dad, and Paul allegedly were in business together with a lot of his business, because Paul, another one, very smart, could have been a CEO.
He very much liked Paul.
Yes.
And respected Paul. So he could do business with. They wanted peace. It wasn't. Nobody wanted a war.
No.
You know, they would prefer to keep peace and everybody have their piece of whatever it is that they're doing, right?
Okay. Yep.
So he had the respect for him, and then John's ego got the best of him.
Now, see, there's the one side and the other side. You have your father, you have the Paul Castellanos, you have the Gambinos, very quiet, old school mafia.
Yep.
John gets out in front. I'm a mobster. It's who I am, and I'm not going to make any bones about it.
Right.
John kills Paul.
Right.
Okay. Your dad. Now, I don't know which story it is, so I would gather you would have an idea.
Sure.
Was your father behind the attempted murder of John Gotti?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes,
And that
but
was
the feds warned him.
A car bomb exploded today, not in the Middle East, but in a quiet neighborhood of Brooklyn. One man was killed. He was 58-year-old Frank DeChico, described as a lieutenant to John Gotti and the reputed head of the Gambino organized crime family.
The feds warned
John Gotti.
Oh, really?
Mm-hmm. That he was coming for him. And so that's why he was not in the car that day.
Okay. Wow.
Yeah.
So I
Interesting,
didn't know
right?
that. Yeah. I thought someone just happened to grab the thing and go out. Wow.
It's my understanding.
So now at that point, did John and Vincent have any connection? As far as like after that happens?
No, my father wanted, so once that happened, my father said he's going to be his own demise. But the problem with that was he was, by him being his own demise, he was causing shit for everybody else.
Correct. Yep.
Right?
The whole families.
So at that point, my father didn't do anything.
But your dad didn't want any kind of protected blanket from that? Like, hey, man, let's get this guy out of here.
He was protected because he put his own protection in at that point.
But I mean, would he ever think of get this guy out? This guy's a problem.
Yeah, he wanted them out. But now that the feds got involved with it, it just kind of was like, okay, we'll put our own protection.
So now your
up
dad's going to say, I'm going to act like the odd father.
Right.
And that's where he went into that role. By being deceptive and cunning, Gigante figured out a way to deceive the FBI. Malinger is to fake. Gigante did just that by claiming he had paranoid schizophrenia, going as far as having medical documentation to support his mentally unfit claims, spending time in psychiatric wards, and playing his part in public. He would dress in bathrobes, slippers, and walk the streets of New York City near his apartment and talk to himself. These antics gave him the name The Oddfather, and it wasn't until the late 90s and early 2000s, when the FBI threatened to go after his family, that he gave up his ruse. John was taking down the families himself.
Yeah.
So your father was probably just like, let me get away, become the odd father. Mm-hmm. And if you could, when was the first time you noticed you acting a little weird?
I noticed it very young. I just didn't understand why.
Did you think it was legitimately something was wrong?
Initially, yes.
Okay.
But then when I was watching him, so a good example is, there would be 6 men plus my father at my grandmother's dining room table in this 4-room apartment, right? The TV would be on, so cartoons would be on. Mm-hmm. The radio would be on, so that would be loud, right? And they would be passing notes back and forth to each other, to my father. And at that point, he was actually in a T-shirt, slacks. He wasn't even in his robe yet. But I'd be watching this, maybe I was around 10 years old. So I'd have one eye on the cartoons an ear and one ear on the other, what was going on there. And you couldn't really hear anything because they would whisper or they would write on a piece of paper and give it to them.
Mm-hmm.
Once they gave it to him, he would nod, they would go over, he would whisper in their ear what to do. And then they would take the paper, rip it up, and flush it down the toilet, or they would burn it in an ashtray.
Okay.
So that went on, and I was like, well, what is that all about? I knew, as I knew all along, he was important, but had no idea what it was he did. At one point, they were telling me he worked in a hat company. What the fuck?
Hat company, okay.
Yeah, that makes no sense. So, you just, and this was my sister that I would talk to. It was not like I could really go to anybody and talk to anybody, right?
Right.
It was only my sister, and she would placate me and all of that. And the kids, and the kids in school, they would say what what their father did for a living. Why was he worked in a hat company? All right. Everybody was like, ooh,
Now,
wow.
did they know who he was? Yeah, I mean, I would imagine they had to.
The kids
They had
didn't
to,
know, but the families knew.
The kids didn't know.
No, we were young.
I thought maybe they would. The parents would be like, "Hey, you don't want to be over
Yeah, but
there."
at 10 years old, nobody's telling their kid we're in the mafia.
Okay, all right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah,
They were
makes
just saying, listen, that's not a good family to be around or something.
Okay.
At that time, though, once I hit, I want to say puberty, maybe even before that, I became a bully at that point. I was like, I'm tired of everybody's shit, and kids making fun of me and all that. So, and I felt very helpless, with what was going on in my family. I felt like I really couldn't help my mom. Couldn't help myself. I was sick a lot, physically sick a lot. So I took down my first boy in 4th grade and pummeled him. And then I didn't get bullied after that. I was big in 4th grade. I know I'm 5'1" now.
Yeah.
But back then I was probably 5'1", and it ended. I just stopped growing at that point.
Right.
So,
and then you had an incident with a girl, Tina.
Tina was in high school.
She was a bully.
Yeah, Tina liked to call me the Mafia princess and this and that. And I started to get an idea of what was going on, but I didn't know fully to what extent. Things were kept from me, especially, because I was the youngest.
Which is amazing how they could keep all that crap happening in front of you.
Yeah.
I mean, and then they keep it quiet.
Right.
Unlike our family, Hispanic, we tell everybody everything. So it would be wild. They would know right away. The feds would be knocking on our door probably about 24 hours in.
Right.
But you guys kept that secret.
Yeah.
And kept it close. And I'll go back to how John acted.
Yeah. Oh, wow.
He was just out there in front of, his hangout, and just having all his members and associates meet there every day. Mm-hmm. Your dad was not like that. He did not like that.
But think about this, right? John wore $3,000 suits.
Yeah, and your dad was in a 4-room apartment.
And wore a bathrobe.
What a bathrobe.
But John drew attention because of that. I would imagine a bathrobe would draw attention as well.
Yeah.
Right?
Down
just
Houston
to
Street.
A different extent. So what I feel most, when he was alive, what I felt most bad about was that he really didn't go out of a 4-block radius unless he had to go to a doctor. He didn't have a life.
But then that begs the question.
Yeah.
Why do that? If you make millions of dollars and you have a great life and have a great family, but you can't do anything with it, what's it worth? At the end of the day, what's it worth? Just the power?
He knows it.
Just power?
He knows it now in spirit, but yeah, it was power.
That boggles my mind that you could have millions and millions of dollars, have more power than anybody, but you can't do anything with it. You can't go out. You live in a fake life. You have 3 families. It would be, to me, I couldn't even remotely get through.
I don't know how he did. You have to have a strong will. You have to have a strong sense of yourself, because most people break, or most people would break under those circumstances.
Right.
So I had to see it from all perspectives. As I started to build my own work and become a psychic medium healer, I had to see my dad in a different light. I couldn't see him as a criminal, even though I knew he was.
Right.
But in order for me to forgive him and what had gone on, I had to see him differently. I had to see him as a father,
Right.
And there were moments that he was a father. Like I remember when I was sick and young, and he would, rub my back and he had great hands. He had surgeon hands, my dad, believe it or not, even though he was a boxer. He would rub my back and I would fall asleep. Or as I got older, he loved Elvis Presley, so I would be able to get him up. And, when we put Elvis on, and he would shuffle around. He couldn't dance for shit, but he had two left feet. But, he just was a dad at that moment. And yet I realized he could go there for maybe 10, 15 minutes and boom, snap right back into that act. I watched him actually get dressed for it, like his robe, his bathrobe, his slippers, his pajamas,
Right.
how he, messed his hair up, how he would sometimes put his hood on if he didn't have his cap on. And he'd say to me, "Let's walk."
Right.
I'd be like, "Oh God, help me." Because you're going to get either people that tip their hat to him because they know who he is, that he protects, this place that they live in and they love him.
Right.
And then you're going to get those that look at you like, "The fuck is happening here?"
Right.
Right? And that's when the family piece that says the loyalty goes, "Mind your fucking business. This is my father." Right? It's a dichotomy.
It's a strange thing, and that's why I want to ask you. Reading your book,
Yeah.
what I got out of it, and what I've got out of all the interviews you've done, you love your dad. I get that. Mm-hmm. But there was a strained relationship there, only because I believe you missed out with your dad. Besides the fact that you were younger, and
Yes.
besides that, but it seems to me like you were yearning for that father in your life,
Sure.
and that kind of put stress on your relationship with your dad, and then him not being around. Did that make you turn more towards the medium psychic healing, meaning like you were in with your own thoughts?
I think I was born to do it.
Okay.
I think I came here with that contract. It was like, you're gonna heal the family lineage. You're gonna do it this way, and you have to go through the adversity that you're going through in order to get to that point. I think Spirit was very good at putting others in my life that could, I want to say, other men or fathers in my life that I could look up to and have a connection with, and I did. So, and even now, there's a lot of men in my life that I have tremendous connections with because I healed the aspect of my father, right? So, but as far as the mediumship and the psychic stuff and the healing, I was on a path to heal me.
Right.
And that drove me to that place.
Right.
And it was because of what I experienced. I was tired of being sick. I didn't want to be sick anymore.
Right.
And
did that, when finally your dad has kind of turned the corner as far as he's now the odd father, he's there, you're older, you walk with him, about it and everything. Now it becomes more serious, obviously. Now the feds are really involved.
Yep.
It's a daily thing. It's a daily thing. I couldn't tell you how many times your dad was on the newspaper. The Times, the Post, and what's the other one there? The Daily News. There was always an article about him or John.
Yeah.
And they loved it. Everybody loved it.
Oh, he loved seeing himself in the newspaper. He really did. But I laugh with him now because they did a piece on me, the Daily News, and I ended up having like 6-7 pages of the Daily News talk about my life and stuff. So I laugh with him. I go, I think I got more than you when you were here.
Oh, yeah.
So the beauty of my relationship with him now is it's tremendously healing, and he helps me when I'm doing my work. He will actually come in and help me.
And that's what I want to get to. So now your dad, obviously, he passed in prison.
Yes.
He had a term, which amazingly, he only got 12 years.
Yeah.
9/11 comes.
9/11 comes.
And that not only was disastrous to this country, but your father.
Right.
If you want to explain that.
Yeah, so that's the first time he actually had a conversation on the phone with us as a quote unquote normal person, right? He came out of character. He was very, very anxious that something happened to one of us because we were back and forth into the city. And so that was part of his demise because, they saw that he was lucid enough. But he was going to get out. my
Yeah.
father. He was getting out until they told him, listen, we're going after your family. It's going to be obstruction of justice. It's going to be this. It's going to be that. Like, either you cop to who you are, or that's what's going to happen. And that's when it shifted for him.
Okay.
That was like, okay, we're done.
And how many years was he left to serve? And when he served those remaining years,
Yeah.
was he normal? Just that?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, that
He was
without-
eating out of vending machines, you know, like devil dogs and shit. This was like not anywhere near the way my father ate because he had a heart condition.
Right.
And he was very OCD himself. So the food was impeccable. You know, it wasn't like, never ate my grandmother's food. Never. Somebody either cooked for him or he got, you know, buffalo steak or there was salmon or there was, and somebody would be cooking for him. Only one of his guys was somebody he knew. When
Really?
he was home, yeah, before he went.
He wouldn't eat his mother's food.
Would not eat his mother's
That
food.
is odd for an Italian family
Yeah.
to eat that. Wow.
We had to eat it, but he wouldn't eat it.
No kidding.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, he ate a certain way. That was it. I
That's
remembered
amazing.
shredded wheat in the morning with yogurt. I looked at him, I go, is it any good? He goes, you get used to it. I went home, I tried it. I says, fuck, it's not that bad.
Not that bad. That's an amazing
that
thing.
bad.
So when he comes, so now he's there. It happens. He gets caught. He doesn't turn you guys in. He takes the rap.
course.
That's what it is. So now you do see him regularly after that.
I only saw him once in jail,
Really?
one time. He came to North Carolina. At that time, I hadn't been on a plane in years. I was very, very fearful of flying. But I didn't want to also see him in a place like that because of how hard it would have been on my own physical body, because being an empath. Because let me tell you something, when I had to visit him in a mental hospital where he was on the 3rd floor with the people that actually had paranoid schizophrenia and all kinds of mental conditions, I was my physical body, my emotions, everything from that, from visiting him was, I would literally get in the room and within 10 minutes I was out cold because I couldn't handle the energy of the place. So going to a prison was not my thing. I went and I saw him once, and like a child, he was angry at me because I hadn't seen him.
Oh.
And he wanted me to take a bigger role, and he wanted me to, in other words, my one sister would go, then the other sister would go, every other week the other family would go. It was that kind of thing. So he wanted me to take a bigger role, and that's where, at that point, I was, to myself, I'm like, no, I'm not doing this anymore.
Okay.
I'm just not. So I drove to North Carolina. I saw him. He began the whole thing being pissed at me. And finally I got to him. You know, like he finally calmed down and I was able to have some conversation with him. And then when I left him, I was devastated to watch him go back into a place that I knew he was probably never coming out.
Wow.
Yeah.
So did you feel something then?
Oh, God, yeah. And I wanted to help him, and I wanted to forgive him, and I wanted to let go of it all.
Did you just want him to say, hey?
Yes, I wanted him to cop to it. As a matter of fact, interestingly enough, I had a conversation like this with him before he even went to jail. He had a heart operation, pig valve put in, right? He was staying at the other woman's brownstone to recover from it. And he asked the doctor to lie to my mother and say he had to stay there because he was closer to the hospital,
Oh, God.
right? And the doctor told him no.
Yeah.
And this guy was on his payroll, but he told him, I can't do it to Olympia. That was my mother. I don't know if you know, maybe you know because you read the book, but the other woman's name was Olympia as
That
well.
is as strange as that.
You can't
the odds
even
of that.
fucking make this shit up.
Because
right?
I only know like Olympia.
Dukakis.
That's it, yes.
Who else do you know?
No one else. That's the
So-
only one.
So he's there, he's recovering, and everybody's going to see him. But what I didn't know at the time was they were breaking bread with this woman, my siblings.
Well,
Okay.
so your siblings,
My own siblings
they were
met
good
with
with
her.
Oh, wow.
They may not have been good with it, but they did it because he told them, you know, come and see me, and they went. Now, my mother...
your dad
My
wanted
dad.
them to come into this woman's house?
Yep.
Who's not their mother,
Who was not their mother.
who's having an affair with
Yes.
and has children with.
Yes.
That's ballsy too, honestly.
Yeah.
Wow.
So my mother, she was a different type of individual. She was not a confrontational woman. She was a beautiful soul, but hurt by a lot of things. Now, she said to me, "I want you to go see your father before he goes away."
Mm-hmm.
I said, "Ma, I go under one condition." I said, "I don't go upstairs." I said, "I stay in the basement, and that's the end of it." I said,
Right.
"And if she thinks to come near me," I said, "it's not going to be good."
Mm-hmm.
So he got that message. So I went. Me and my sister Roseanne went because we were the only two that hadn't gone. So we went. I gathered my thoughts. When we got in there, we met him in the basement, but it was like crowded. You couldn't even move, you know. So he says, "Okay, if we go into the living room." I said, "Only okay if she's not there." So he promised me she wasn't going to be there. So we went up there. We sat. Now, mind you, everything was like the dungeon at my grandmother's house. Everything was closed. All the windows, the drapes. There was, you know how the Italians put plastic on the furniture? There was paper on the floor. I was like, I couldn't understand it. Just couldn't understand it. But I was like, okay. So we're sitting at the table. And the conversation was, did you tell her that the truth about you and Mom and, you know, and the relationship and all of that? And he just laughed. I says, "Oh, no, don't laugh." I says, "I need to know the truth. Did you tell her?" This went on for about 5 minutes, and then he got pissed. And then he said to me, "I told her." I said, "So she knows the truth?" "Yes, she knows the truth." I don't know if he was telling me the truth, but I wanted the answer.
So he probably was laughing, just my thought, looking from the outside in, to kind of tame it a little bit. More like
Nervous,
he was probably
number
guilty.
Guilty, nervous, and laughing at the fact that I had the balls to speak my mind at that point. I think my sister wanted to run under the table because she didn't know what he was going to do at that point.
The fact that he was confronted, nobody confronted Chin.
Right.
Nobody did.
Right.
Kids, siblings, brothers, whatever, nobody did.
Right.
So to have that come from you, his youngest daughter.
I was done. I was done with the whole situation.
So I go back to your relationship there.
Yeah.
When he dies,
Yeah.
what did you feel?
You know, there was so much. Relief was one thing I felt immediately.
Mm-hmm.
Sadness, not so much for him, but for my mother.
Right.
Because I knew she was going to be devastated. I cried more for her than I did. I was relieved for us, but I was also relieved for him because he didn't have to be in a jail anymore, which, in my opinion, he was always in a jail because he never really left.
Yeah.
Right?
He never did.
So he was just behind bars this time. My sister said, you know, he eats whatever he wants now. I said, well, that's freedom. I said, that's good. You know, let him eat out of the vending machine. Who gives a shit at this point?
Right.
So there was so many emotions when I first heard it. Like I dropped to my knees. I was like, no, Dad, you know, like, what did you do kind of thing. And then immediately I spoke to my friend who was a medium, and he came through immediately. And he said, what do you think he said? Go take care of your mother.
Go take care of your mother.
I'm fine.
Yeah.
I'm going to be back to speak to you. And I thought to myself, maybe through somebody, but not me, because I wasn't a medium, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I go to my mother's, and we're all crying, obviously. It was, my mother said the week before he didn't look good. He was bloated. His feet were bloated, you know. So he was already having congestive heart failure.
Mm-hmm.
There's talk about them screwing with his meds and all of that. We're never going to know the truth. But he wasn't eating the way he used to eat or anything. So I was grateful that he was free, but sad because he left a whirlwind here when he left. There was no knowing of where monies were. There was no, we ended up having to sell my mother's jewelry just to keep her in her house longer. It was sad, it was a sad thing. So at that point, we all got on with our lives. It was like the end of one book, another book opened, and Mom got 10 more years out of her own life. Some of it suffering, some of it good. There was a freedom to her as well.
So your father passes. Let me just see the dynamics here. So your father passes. What's your relationship like with your siblings at this point?
Have siblings or?
Well, we'll do both.
Okay.
Okay, so your regular siblings,
Yeah.
legit, Gigante.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. What's the relationship with them? Because I know it was a little strained.
So yeah, I mean, because of the way things were, it was strained. Because at one point, my brothers were close to the half brother. My sister was close to the half sisters, but that ended when my sister wasn't going to see my father anymore, and they got pissed off, and they stopped talking. Then my one brother was in touch with the half brother. I really only stayed connected to my sisters throughout this thing. And, I felt I made amends with my father when I wrote the forgiveness letter.
Okay.
And I sent it to him in jail, and he responded, which...
If you don't mind, if you want to.
Yeah, I had been asking Spirit to help me with the forgiveness piece because I wanted to release it out of my body. I didn't want any more physical ailments from it. And I've been struggling and journaling and doing all kinds of stuff to help myself with it. And one night I woke up at 3 o'clock in the morning, and I immediately went to my computer and I started to write. And it took me maybe till 7 o'clock that morning when I finished the letter. And it was telling my father, I want you to know who I am because you don't. You don't truly know who I am. And I told him I forgave him and I forgive myself, and, for anything I did to get in the way of the relationship, and had no expectations when I sent it. But I knew by sending it, it would release it from me and hopefully help him. Well, he read it and called my mother and was like, where is she now? He didn't know I had moved out. I was living my life, So he was unbelievably taken by the letter, like almost in tears, talking to my mother and telling her to tell me that he understands exactly what I was saying. And so in that point, I felt the shift. And a lot of people may not understand this, but I can feel any energy anywhere around the world, just like a lot of people felt 9/11 before it happened. So in that moment, my mother spoke to me. I could feel the shift in him. And I said, okay, the healing begins. So the healing for him was already happening before he passed. And then once he passed, he came to me eventually and said, I want to work with you.
Does that make you feel better?
100%.
And you're at peace with the relationship you guys had?
Totally.
Okay.
Totally. Because I help people now that have not been able to make peace with their family members before they passed. And now I'm able to help them make that peace. Because there's no difference. The only difference between here and the spirit world is there's no time. Here we have linear time. There's no time. But forgiveness can happen whether you're here or there.
Your medium stuff.
Yes.
If you wouldn't mind, I have a situation.
Please.
I do. This is, and my wife is here now, so this is the first time her hearing this.
Oh.
So this will be interesting. I bake at night, and her husband had passed away 4 years ago. Okay, And we still have in her home photos of her father, of her husband, because she has 2 boys, and he did live there. So it's not, I don't have a problem with that. I don't, no problem at all.
He loves you, by the way. He is the one that brought you to her.
I was just going to ask you this. This is amazing. This is unbelievable.
Yeah.
Okay.
He brought you to her because he knew that you would be kind, gentle, compassionate.
This is unbelievable.
Loving.
I cannot believe this.
And most of all, loyal, because she's big on loyalty.
Yeah.
So.
And I'll tell you, I will be baking at night.
Yeah, he'll come.
I swear. I look and it's the same picture that is hanging on the fridge.
Yeah. He's always wanted to thank you for taking the cue that he gave you to.
It honestly is an amazing thing. I couldn't, because we spoke about it. And I said, I'm telling you, there's something here.
Yeah.
But I never told her that I would see it. And I don't think he's mad.
Oh,
I don't think he's mad.
No. Sometimes he wants to give you a message, though. So he's saying, pay attention, because I have a message maybe for her or his kids. Mm-hmm. So you're open to, that is, excuse me, that is are you here at 3 o'clock in the morning?
Yeah.
Okay. So at that hour, they call it the hour of mercy. But at that hour, it's a very auspicious time to be with spirit. Sometimes I wake up in the middle of the night and it's 3 o'clock in the morning and I hear them and they're in need of talking to me. It's that time frame between that and like 5 o'clock that it's easy for them to get to you.
It is really, when first my brother had told me to, hey, I'd like to get Rita on. And I've heard, and obviously we go through the Mafia stuff, but then I got into more of the medium stuff and the spiritual healing. And then you said, I want to help people. I love helping people.
Right.
I just do.
Right.
So I think I was drawn to say, we could do a StreamYard interview. We could do this. I want Rita here.
Right.
I want to feel that energy too.
Sure.
Because I can see that you're a good person.
Oh, thank you.
Honestly, I can sense it. Even when you walked into the door, I didn't know what I was getting into, to be quite honest with you. I said, this girl is from Jersey, Old Pan, right down the street from me, so she's going to be a little rough around the edges.
No, I'm not.
But you're not.
Yeah.
You're just so totally different than what you would expect someone coming from that tragedy, coming from that environment. And it was, not saying financially, because you guys were well off, just the environment of the chaos that was surrounding your life. You almost wish that you were just, hey, I'll do whatever, instead of having this not glorious life, meaning you can get anything you want, do whatever you want, No,
and we weren't, we got, but in the end, there was nothing.
That's
like
what I
people
mean.
always, there's always someone in the audience that will ask me, where's the money? And I say to them, if I knew, I would have given it away. And they'd say, what do you mean? And I'd say, I'd change that blood money into something very different.
That's powerful.
I would have started something for children, for, the elderly, for a cause, animals, whatever. I said that money would have been used in a way that would have changed the energy of it.
Yeah, you got a big soul, big heart, big soul.
I couldn't tell you where. I'm sure plenty of people have it. And nobody was coming to my door going, hey, listen, he told us that after he passed to give it to you. Yeah, nobody was coming. Yeah. So, but you know what? There's something to be said about that, because I learned a great deal on the value of money and how to manifest it myself.
Right.
And not have to rely on his money or anything like that. And that's huge. That brought me to to an understanding about myself, where I was like, oh, okay, this is big. This is big for me.
Now, what I do at the end of the podcast, I like to do word association.
Sure.
Okay, and it could be someone that's present, it could be someone that's before, it could be good, it could be bad. No rules. You can say whatever you need.
Absolutely.
Okay. Whatever you mean. So I'm going to say a name. You just give me a little bit about them, and we'll take it from there. John Gotti.
So I only know John through my dad, or in a newspaper, or watching his energy on TV. So I could really only speak to that. John had a huge ego, right? He liked to be noticed. but yet when I look at his energy, I see a boy that needs attention. You know, like I'm looking at his soul in a completely different way. Like it was sad for me to see somebody actually vie for so much attention because for some reason, he couldn't own that himself. He couldn't find that within himself. You know, so we're getting it from here and from there, and people oohing and eyeing over him. You know, the other aspect is, you know, he thought he was above others, including my father. He didn't have the respect for the line of command. You know, so I saw both sides of him.
Okay.
Because I was at a point in my life where I could see both sides of everyone, you know, being I could forgive my father and even my mother and whoever else.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sammy the Bull. Sammy the Bull Gravano was Gotti's underboss, muscle, and strategic advisor. Unsatisfied that he was going to take the fall after being criminally indicted, he suspected Gotti was setting him up on FBI audio tapes. He turned government informant. Sammy would later testify in court that Gigante was actually the boss of the Genovese family and was not crazy as he portrayed himself to be.
Sammy the Bull. Wow.
Because he gets both.
Listen.
Some people really like him. Okay.
I don't know him. I can only speak to, you know, what he has said or where I've seen him on TV or anything like that. I'm more concerned about the fact that he killed X amount of people and is still kind of walking around living a life. I'm hoping at this point he's, you know, humbled himself and does not have that tremendous ego. Because in that life, ego was ruled, you know. Although there was pieces of my father where his soul was, he had a gentle soul. He would help anybody in that neighborhood. People that couldn't pay their rents, people that couldn't eat, he was helping. So there was that side of him. Sammy the Bull, I don't know if, you know, I don't know. I hope today, and honestly, I hope all those families and their children come out of this with a different energy from what they were in, because everybody suffered in that world. All the kids suffered. So I'm hoping that they all came full circle as well. I don't know if they did, you know. Yeah,
he does talk highly about your father, though.
Oh, well, that's nice.
Yeah, he does. Not that you know I know him, but everything I've seen, he does talk highly of him. Michael Franchese.
I really love his energy. He's changed. He's, you know, from who he was. But I think meeting his wife and becoming connected to more of a spiritual aspect of his life, he's made a huge shift, and so I respect him for that.
And he wasn't more of he was more of a racketeer. He was a very, very smart businessman.
Very.
Could have done, again, like your dad, like Paul Castellano.
Like he's doing now.
I mean, the guy's done very well.
Brilliant.
Unbelievable.
You know?
And he speaks well.
He's very well spoken. He treated me with much respect, and I respect him. You know. Yeah.
So. Did you ever know him before or no? Just from when you meeting him?
No, I didn't. I knew of him.
Okay.
But I didn't know him. I knew the guys that, you know, used to come to the house all the time. Okay. You know, there was like 16 Doms, all with different names. You know, I knew those guys, and they loved us. They were like family to us. You know, I didn't see any of them as any of what they depicted as being in the mafia.
Almost like Vito Genovese. Like you would look at him and be like, "Oh, what a gentle old man."
Yeah.
Not what he was.
No. But these guys they would come in and kiss you hello and how are you, and very respectful. Like, I mean, they had to be, but I'm just saying.
Right.
They were nice people, you know, in that world for me.
Okay. And your mom?
My mom is a gentle soul. She did not get to live her true life here, but she chose my dad, loved him no matter what. And when I asked her why she stayed, even after everything, she said, because I never could see him beyond the 12-year-old that was such a kind energy and so loving to her. Like, they knew each other as babies. They grew up, my grandmothers knew each other. They grew up playing on the roof as babies. So at 12 years old, they had their first kiss. She said he was innocent, Ray. He wasn't this person. She never forgot the innocence in him. And it's funny, she helped me see him in a different light by telling me that forgiveness. But the other aspect of my mother, she could sing like Barbra Streisand. She could dance and she could draw. So there were things about her that I felt bad that she couldn't, do in this life that could have maybe helped her have more of a, more self-esteem about her, not to take the bullshit, all the time.
So you feel she wasn't fulfilled in her life?
I think to a degree because she loved my father, but there was so many other aspects that I don't think. She had the best family though, and we were saved by that family because they were the fun gamblers playing cards and the horses and things like that. We would go away with them. Hysterical, like they were just funny people, so they took a lot of the burden off. And then the other aspect of Mom was she took too much of my energy and she apologized for it when she passed. I had to forgive her for that piece.
Yeah.
She relied on me way too much. It was too heavy for me. She couldn't handle it.
And not that it's a burden, it's just you end up always taking care of your parents. It's always almost circle of life.
Yeah, but when you're doing it from the time you're born,
it's hard. It's extremely hard
till she passes, and
because
that's exactly what
you have to live your life at some point, and you've done very well.
Oh
for
my
yourself.
God, I'm completely blessed.
Yes,
completely.
So I got two more.
Yeah,
for you. The first one I want you to think about because the second one I'm going to get an answer pretty quickly. Your Uncle Pat.
I loved Uncle Pat. Oh my God. He was another gentle soul. Loved my grandmother. Went to bat for her whenever it came to my grandfather. Was true to who he was. Lived with a man. We loved him. His name was Joe. I remember going to his house in Long Island. And they would make dinner for us, but this was a spread like you've never seen. He decorated my mother's home. He was friends with, he was in the entertainment business, so my sister was able to meet Al Pacino. We had Ally McGraw and Steve McQueen eat with us in Joe's restaurant. I met Farrah Fawcett. This was beyond. He was just that type of uncle that. Yes, he was involved, but no, he wasn't involved in the way that everybody else was involved. So he was like on the outskirts of it, I want to say. And if my father needed something, of course, he would be there, but he wasn't center. He died young,
Did he?
He did. He was in his 60s. He had just come back from the doctor. They gave him a clean bill of health. He had a massive heart attack. Wow. Same day.
Oh, you're kidding.
Yeah. I think it was the same day, if not within the week.
How did that affect you?
Oh my God, because I knew he was gay.
Yeah.
I know. And I wanted to get close to him just because there was nobody else in the family that I could really connect to. But it was the hardest on my grandmother because he was the first. And she was extremely close to him. Extremely. So.
Wow. So finally, obviously, the good, the bad.
The ugly.
The ugly.
Go ahead.
Your father.
Yeah.
I mean, that's,
So prior to him passing and prior to me understanding him in a really all-encompassing way, I was pissed at him. His ego was very large, the size of my mother's house, and then some. I didn't like how he pit his children against each other to get what he wanted. And he did not want me to have the lifestyle that I have. So he would be, always asking, who am I with and who do I spend time with? And thank God it was at the point where they were watching him so he couldn't pay too much attention to my life. But I was angry that they couldn't help me. I was angry that he helped me start a business and then took it out from underneath my feet, because he never had an intention of me succeeding. I was angry that he didn't treat us the way he treated the other children. It was very different, the relationships. I was angry that he, destroyed my mother in many ways. And I was angry at her for not growing a set of balls and, being who she needed to be.
Right.
And so I had to get over a lot of, and then there was fear. I was afraid of him, because I knew what he was capable of. So it was awkward. Conversation was awkward with him until I got older. I am the type of person that could talk to the wall like my mother and get an answer. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. With him, he was so one word. There was like one word, like, how you doing? Good. How's school? Good. How's your mother? Good. You taking care of her? Yeah. I mean, that was really the extent of our conversations a lot of the times, Wasn't until I got older, when I was going to massage school, when I was doing these things, that I would sit, which he hated, by the way. Did not want me to go to massage school, but my mother told him, leave her alone. So when I would come, he'd say, rub my back, rub my shoulders. And then he would say to me, you got good hands. I said, I got your hands. So then it got a little bit better. It got a little bit like we had some sort of a conversation. He'd be doing his bike and lifting his handheld weights. And he'd go, come over here. And he'd go, this is good for you. Do you do this? I'm like, I do it every day, Dad. Like, I was a massage therapist. I was a personal trainer. And he goes, well, you got to do it like this. This is like, and of course his way was the best way. Even when it came to his brothers, he wanted to be my grandmother's favorite. You could tell there was a thing anytime the brothers came. So, there was like a jealousy thing. But I would laugh at him. He was another one that needed the attention. So I could see the child within him yearning for that, Yeah.
So ultimately, at the end of the day,
I love him.
You love him.
Of course.
I mean, it takes so much. You'd have to do so much to not have your kids love you. And
he did his best to do that.
He did. So to me, I can look at Rita Gigante, Vincent, as a good father and a good person. I know that sounds outrageous.
My God, there were aspects of him that were fantastic.
But it's the stuff that you see that we can't on the outside.
Right.
And I do think deep down, he wanted to be a good person.
Yes.
Provide for his family.
Yes.
Coming up from poverty to take care of his family. Whether he had 2 families, 3 families.
Didn't matter.
Didn't matter.
Nope.
Well, I can tell you he's done a fantastic job with you.
Oh.
You are an unbelievable talker.
Thank you.
You are an unbelievable speaker, a great healer. And
appreciate
I
that.
really find that so interesting that you knew before I even came out of my mouth.
Yeah.
Because I would think about it like, is my my wife's ex-husband helping our relationship to be solid and make sure that she has what she wants in the second half of her life? Because my wife was very young to lose her husband at that point.
Absolutely.
So
he's saying to me he wants you to travel with her.
She had to have told you. She had to tell you that because no. But it does. You know what? Wow, this is an amazing thing.
Yeah.
I mean, I could have a conversation with you for hours.
Sure. I'd be more than happy to do another one of
we
these.
We do have a StreamYard now. I'd love that if you could at some point so we could sit there, we could converse about this.
Sure.
It is an amazing thing. You are an amazing woman.
Thank you.
And I wanted to thank you for coming out here.
I want to thank you. This was the pleasure was mine, because to be able to get my story out, to be able to help as many as I can, and maybe even something happened today that was a healing thing for you guys. But he says, start planning the trip. Yeah, wow. You better have somebody else make the bagels for a little bit.
If I told you the story, she wants to go to Aruba. We talked about it yesterday.
Okay.
And she said, can I book it now? And I said, let's wait.
Yeah, no. There's no waiting. No.
All right, well, guess we'll book the trip then, Michelle.
Yeah.
Yes.
She's like, oh, thank you, God.
But again, I thank you for coming. You did not have to do this. You were, you don't know what the honor it is for me to have someone like you here. Yeah. We are a small podcast. We are growing. Do you have any social media that people can contact you with?
Do I have social media? Yes. I don't do my social media, but I have it because if I had to do everything, my mind would be forget it. But yes, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter. My website is ritagigante.net. Okay. And what else?
Do you do anything on YouTube as far as?
I do. Okay. Patreon is something.
Patreon. Okay, yeah.
I do. So every week on a Thursday, I'm on there teaching something. Okay. Or I'm doing a guided meditation to help people learn how to get their own information.
That's great. Yeah. Again, thank you for coming.
Thank you.
All the way from New Jersey to come here. Oltapan?
Yes.
Still there?
Well, Tapan, because I'm in New York now. So I'm right on the border of Oltapan and Tapan.
Okay, good. Well, good. Yeah. But I know Oltapan. Yeah. So, again, thank you for coming.
Oh, it's a pleasure, hon. Thanks.
Thank you.
All right. Nice job. That was good. Oh, awesome.